Hello, everyone. This is Zia along with Sabur and Bakhtiar. A few days ago, there was a Quran burning incident, or actually, quite a few of the holy books were burnt in or near Bagram Airport in air base in Afghanistan. As a result, at least 7 people have died so far, 5 Afghans and 2 US troops. Why it happened, United States government, the President of the United States has apologized for it. There are a lot of people who are up in arms about it. There are a lot of demonstration happening in Afghanistan, and there are obviously quite a few opinionated people in the United States as well. Let's start with you, Sabur. What do you think happened, and what do you think can be done about it?
Well, nobody can say for certain what exactly may have happened, so you have to take the government's word that it was a mistake. But we need to put a little bit of context around it. There is a definite need of some sensitivity towards how some of the Muslims feel about the holy book. We've been in 2 wars, one in Iraq and now in Afghanistan. And these types of incidents have been coming up again and again. Initially, one could have argued that there was some lack of information, and people were just passionate about it, and they took a certain route expressing those passions. But now, 10, 11 years into these conflicts, I think the military should train its troops in a way that they should be able to differentiate between their professional commitment and something like this.
Right, but I think there's a slight difference between the kind of burning. I mean, there is this burning that was that Reverend Terry Jones, I believe his name was, who was threatening that, and this burning, which may be a result of just a mistake. So there's not an ideological burning, but something that happened. I mean, something that Muslims actually do when a copy of Quran gets old, and then you have these statues and how to dispose them off safely. You can burn them. Isn't that one of the things that we use as well?
There are many different aspects to this situation. There are political aspects. There are religious perspectives. There are local perspectives of the Afghans. There's the perspective of the U.S. government. There's the perspective of the soldier on the ground. 10 years plus into this conflict, I think the U.S. government, the United States military, should have and perhaps have worked it out to where this is not an institutional problem. But it is certainly a pervasive problem in the mindset of the U.S. soldier on the ground, whether that's in Iraq or in Afghanistan. By the same token, as we were talking about it earlier, you can look at it from the other side. Yes, it is what most people do when a copy of the Quran is illegible, needs to be destroyed or removed from circulation. But I don't think that at the end of the day that this was a benign mistake. I think it was a deliberate act on the part of the people on the ground. I do not think it was an institutional US military or US government policy, but it was a clear political and religious provocation on the part of the people who committed this.
Okay, so as educated people, I think it's important to make a distinction between what is holy and what is not as well. So I can completely understand people who are extremely emotional about it, who will not listen to logic. But as much as I am not in favor, I shouldn't say again, it's not in favor of Wahhabism. We all know how Quran is handled in Saudi Arabia, even Makkah Sharif, where Quran would be sitting on the floor somewhere, being not exactly kicked around. But yes, I mean, if somebody touched it with their feet, it wouldn't be a big deal.
Just like any other book.
Just like any other book, exactly. I mean, it's made out of pulp. It has chemicals that make up the words. So the holy is the word of God, which was brought to Hazrat Muhammad, right? But not the book itself. So why that distinction?
Well, I think you can call it cultural or traditional, and you have to account for it. It's very true that you can burn as many Qurans as you want. That's not going to take away the message. It's at the end of the day a reference book, a guiding book for people who prescribe to it. But then at the same token, that book has some more meaning than any other book from a library, for example. And that extra meaning association to it is because it's considered to be a divine word. by people who believe. So they associate, they give it an extra respect. They they may consider it just like any other book, that they would still keep it safe, read it with respect and whatnot. So those kinds of sensitivities, anybody who is operating in that kind of environment needs to be cognizant of.
But I think we're not.
Yeah, sorry,
Yeah.
sorry
Okay.
to
Please go
interrupt.
ahead. Yes.
It is the context. Yes, it is any other book. Yes, the message is not lost when you burn it, throw it, or whatever. But it is the context of where the U.S. Army, which is in occupation of and while these are not my personal views, but looking at it, and this is certainly a perspective, where the U.S. Army is in occupation of a Muslim country.
And they have to be extra sensitive about
and
things
they
like
need
these.
to be extra sensitive, where there is a history of similar things that have happened in the past, and whether that was dead bodies being urinated upon and so on and so forth. In that context, something like this cannot just be shrugged off as a benign occurrence. And so you cannot also, by the same token, fault the people at the other end, the local population and or Muslim population, to use that word, to see some kind of a sinister, and sinister is just a bad word, but some kind of a message behind this episode.
No,
Yeah,
I agree.
I think that's the point that we were trying to make, that after 11 years of this is still happening, then it's very tough to believe that it's benign.
But Sabur, we're not really helping our cause as well. Let me actually give you another example, something that happened a few years ago when a cartoonist from Denmark made a cartoon of Prophet Muhammad, right? This was an obscure newspaper, an obscure place where nobody probably even read it, but the Muslims ourselves, we made such a huge deal out of it that people actually started talking about it. People actually started using it on Facebook. Other people started making these cartoons as well. So shouldn't we be more pragmatic about it as well? I mean, things like this may be serious, but I think we're giving an image of, you know what, we love to create fuss about everything. We are so sensitive about everything. Isn't the fault lie in what we are doing as well, a little bit?
Yes, but we are so sensitive. And okay, here's the thing. But the problem, unfortunately, is that we are human beings. There's a lot of baggage that we carry. And yes, it would be nice to get rid of that. And it perhaps is doable in a context sitting here between you, me, and him. But when you apply this to 200 million Pakistanis, or you apply this to X million Afghans or a billion Muslims, I don't think it's that easily done. And so I'm afraid that argument does not hold, that a billion Muslims or 200 million Pakistanis need to change their mindset.
They shouldn't. And I think also
need to the 150,000 or 96,000 American troops in the United States in Afghanistan
have to be sensitive about what they're doing. Also, Bakhtiar, and Sabur, let me put this question to you. Also, it's us people living in the United States. I think the so-called educated people who are more pragmatic and having a secular mind, we can understand these things. And obviously people living in Pakistan or in Afghanistan, they have a different world. And sometimes I think we forget that we have that link as well. Living in the United States, how do you think we tackle news like this? Obviously, I mean, the right-wingers, the Newt Gingrich has run away with it, calling Obama's apology a disgrace. What should we do as Pakistanis in this?
Well, let me parse this question into two and answer one question that you perhaps didn't ask me. I don't think this sensibility that we subscribe to is necessarily limited to people who may be educated or secular. You would find this kind of sensibility even in people who may not be, in a classic sense of the word, considered educated or secular for that matter. The way we handle this type of a news here in the United States is that it's troubling to see that our army would not be sensitive to these kinds of things so far along in this war or in this conflict. And these kinds of issues would crop up time and again, and with our government having to apologize for the mistakes of hopefully just a few. Having said that, unfortunately, the kind of stance that Newt Gingrich has taken on reflects the kind of base he's playing for, which is the right-wing base in the United States. And in the last couple of years, Islam and Muslims have been given, absolutely incorrectly, a perspective amongst the politicians. The issue has been politicized, and he's just playing to that base. What President Obama had done was a very gracious thing. I think any president, regardless of what party or persuasion they may belong to, would do just that. But that doesn't mean that he is appeasing to some radical elements. I mean, that has nothing to do with it. There are 1.5 billion people in this world who consider that a step which hurts their feeling. And if a president of a country, that alone, the United States of America, comes around and says, sorry, it was a mistake, there's nothing wrong about it. And Newt Gingrich in this particular instance was absolutely incorrect.
So I think that's very well. Is what would I tell my children if they ask me about?
That's
Okay,
certainly a
so
good point. Yes.
For starters, I think this issue didn't even register on the radar of my children. Okay. So, but if it did, I would probably tell them that this is more a reflection on the state of mind and the ignorance on the part of the people who did it than anyone else. And that, as we were talking about it earlier, that the message doesn't get lost if someone burns the book or does something sacrilegious to it. And that, indeed, President Obama's apology was gracious. And that Newt Gingrich is playing local politics. I mean, that's not even worthy of a comment at this point.
All right, I think enough said about this. It was an insensitive thing to do. I think the U.S. Army could have been more careful about what they were doing. I think President Obama's apology was probably very appropriate. I think the reaction in Afghanistan and Pakistan is probably understandable, and I think Bakhtiar quite wisely summarized how we should tackle it, and Sabur as well in the United States. Thank you very much for watching.